In season 1, we talk about the phenomenon of parasocial relationships that are more about socializing around an idea than having a reciprocal, intimate exchange. Today we hear from Sheyun Ogunsumlade, one of the pastors of One Shot Church in Silver Spring, Maryland. Sheyun, who is also a Christian rapper, was born in Washington, D.C. to Nigerian parents and has recently released the EP Invincible Summer. In this interview, you'll hear Sheyun reflect on his intimacy with Jesus, living in his own bubble, and how he checks in to make sure he's bringing his full self, emotions, and all to his relating with God. Stay tuned. I am Dr. Shauna Knox, and this is Further, where we explore the real Christ and the real you. The way to life is extremely narrow, and very few of us ever even find it. But let's keep looking. We'll do it together. A parasocial relationship is a type of relationship that only exists on one side of the relationship. So Sheyun, have you ever been in a parasocial relationship?
Are we going straight to me and God or with people, or does it matter?
Take it wherever you'd like to take it.
Yeah, I would say for me, in human context, definitely.
Okay.
I think I flash all the way back to middle school. I had switched schools in 7th grade, so then I remember I was kind of the new guy effect, like, oh, I'm the new guy at school, and then there's like all these new girls, of course, to me, and it's like, putting myself back in those adolescent shoes, I was just creating romances in my head, and I would never actually get the guts to work up. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna ask her out if I do it this way, or okay, if I run by her in the hallway, I'm gonna do this or that. And I just remember multiple instances where it's like I would really be living out these scenarios, but they never really happened, just based on timing or me being a little bit of a punk. So I would say that's a good reference point for me, thinking about like my hopeless romantic self in middle school in particular. So
I never thought about it as a but it makes sense. Like that's kind of what's happening when you become infatuated with someone you don't know.
Yeah.
You're like building out this idea, but it only exists on your side. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so when you were doing that in middle school, or perhaps even later when you continued having other parasocial relationships, what would you say you have gotten from having that kind of relationship?
I think I don't know if there's many benefits as much as in reflection. I would say I get things from it, as far as understanding that sometimes the best approach is to confront your fears head on, and sometimes your fears are not as real as they'll seem when you just keep them in your head. So as that relationship could have changed, or I could have just even removed all of the angst if it was just like, hey, just talk, or hey, just realize that this person is real, which means that you don't just see this imaginary perfect image you've created of them, but they actually have reality to them if you were to embrace it. So I think for me, there's a lot of lessons, but they all come more so in hindsight than in the midst of it. In the midst of it, it makes me very anxious, uncertain, worried. You go up and down, but I guess there is this kind of hope on the inside like, oh, this is an ideal situation
Yeah.
if I could just kind of step
Keeps
into
it really idyllic.
Yeah, I think you do have this kind of, which is a good thing. I guess hope drives you forward.
Yeah.
But I do think it should be reined in as well with some reality of like action too, you know? So,
And you talk about fear. So would you say then keeping it imaginary, keeping the relationship to some degree non-existent,
yeah.
is there a type of safety in that?
There's definitely safety, but it's a pseudo safety, I would
Okay.
say, right? It's like you have created a bubble of insulation that keeps you from experiencing the risk. But if you don't experience risk, you'll never truly experience love. And that's what I've realized. I'm like, man, love comes
Wow.
with risk 100%.
Wow.
So it's like you can create this insulated bubble where it's like, this is my world. Everything's fine here. But you have to realize like love takes risk. And therefore in that risk, other people are allowed close enough to hurt you. And I think that's with all relationships in all contexts. If you don't embrace risk, you don't allow yourself to be close enough to get to the true point of what true intimacy and like a true close relationship is like. So it's like it's a fake safety. It's an illusion, you know.
So in your mind, the distance between you and the person who you would have had a real relationship with, the distance is actually what made you to feel safe.
Yeah.
Wow.
It leaves you at a stance where you don't have to confront reality. And confronting reality causes growth. It causes more knowledge to be gained. It causes a clear picture to be created of what you should be doing going forward. But the more you can live in this kind of dream state, you're not really confronting reality, and it will leave you at some point, you know. But while it lasts, it might be cool, but it's not real, you know. So
did you always know that you were in a parasocial relationship when you were in one?
No.
No.
I think the deceiving part about it is when you're in it, you can't see fully. So sometimes, and this is, I guess in all relationships, not even kind of the parasocial one-sided relationship, sometimes you can be with whether it's a friend or a romantic relationship, and someone on the outside is trying to tell you like, yo, this person is not it. They're wild. They're this, and you're like, of course not. Like I love them. They're so, because when you're in the midst of it, it reminds me of a horse with blinders. You're so focused on that person or that thing that you can't see the full picture. So it's always funny when you have people on the outside offering that perspective, and then when you look back, you're like, wow, they were so right.
Yeah.
But I couldn't see it. You know, so.
If we dial that into relationship with God, I guess my question now is, have you ever found that your relationship with God was bordering on parasocial or just fully a parasocial relationship?
Yeah, I think the difficulty with that is if it were one-sided, it would be that God came 100% and I came far less than that to him, you know? And I think even looking back over my life, it's like, I think I've always had this context of like, man, God came 100% towards me, but am I caught up in creating some images or infatuations with other things that are becoming more alluring to me than who God really is? So I would say the struggle has always been, for lack of a better word, idols. It's like other things that are trying to compete and rival the position that I know God's supposed to have. But then other things begin to kind of pull away or pull me away from getting closer to him. But I would say, yeah, I felt like that, but I've never really, I would say from a very young age, the reality of God has been there. So it's always been like, no, he's real. He's there. And then also the truth of if something's changing in our relationship, it's not him, it's me.
And what about those themes, though, of the risk of allowing yourself to know and be known and the distance that makes it feel safe? Have any of those tropes been present in your relating with God over time?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones and it relates to distance and risk, is the theme of trust. I have said for a long time that when I came to the realization that I did not trust God was one of the biggest steps for me to take towards getting closer to him. Because it would present itself in a lot of ways where I'm like so worried about
Yep.
things back from when I was applying to college, and it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen to my future if I don't get this perfect score and this test and do this and apply here and do da 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 da. So many things that showed me I was not open to risk because I wanted control. And the desire for control was because there was a lack of trust in the goodness, the actual character of who God was. So I would say that was the biggest thing that presents itself that makes me create this false reality, which is that I can control my life or that I know better plans for my life than God knows.
Did you ever feel any risk in specifically allowing God to know you, like to make yourself known, completely revealed, naked?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, that concept of the risk of allowing myself to be known, I think the context we start from is always human, being that we relate to humans directly from the time we're born. And from our relationship to humans, it forms a context through which we relate to God. So being born to in a Nigerian family and just stereotypically, but also very particularly in my family,
Yeah.
we're not sitting down talking about emotion
Got
and
you.
like,
Yeah.
oh, this is my heart and here's how I feel. It's
Yeah.
like, nah, chill. What? So it's
Yeah.
like, do what you need to do, keep it moving. So I think I inherently connected that same lens to God, where it's like, of course God knows me, but what do I don't need to sit
But
down
not
and like
really.
lay and like, oh
Knows
Lord,
me.
here know me. It's like, nah, he knows me. It's cool, but I don't even unpack emotions for myself. So I think I'm still currently in a place of learning what it means to unpack them with God. And that deep, I think there's a much deeper level of intimacy to get to. I would say I wasn't scared of it. I was just unaware of it
Unaware.
before.
Yeah.
And I think now I'm aware of it and I'm trying to learn and become more comfortable with it.
In the place where you are now, where you're sort of grappling with allowing yourself to be more and more, progressively more known by God,
Yeah.
can you feel when you've pulled away a bit, when you're a little bit distant, going back to that safe place, kind of retreating?
I would say the interest and context, especially for me, like just growing up, serving in church a lot, and then in particular serving in youth ministry, and then now like working with young adults in church, and not to flip it in a judgmental way, but I see it in the people I'm with.
You see distance.
I see it's a lovely analogy I use of I think my old pastor used to say it and I was like I would always roll my eyes at him, but it's so true. People will, if you literally picture a sanctuary or a church building, people will come and no one wants to sit on the front row, and it's like, this is too exposing, there's a lot of people.